such insight, such wisdom. It's really quite marvelous. I've had the opportunity in the past couple of days to spend some time with our esteemed guest this evening, John Hunter, and speaking with him and learning about the accomplishments that he's done over his career with these children that he works with, and coupled this evening with the sort of brilliance that we see in display in our own community. Really gives me hope. There's some days where I wake up and I have to go teach my classes on social political philosophy and peace studies, and I despair about protests and war and famine. And it's events like this, I think, that really sort of inspire me to keep on doing the work that I do, and I hope that it inspires you to keep on doing the work that many of you do here in the community. I won't say very much more. I know that we're here to see a little bit about the work that John Hunter does. But what we're going to be screening this evening is the film World Peace and Other Fourth Grade Achievements. And this was a film that was documenting some of John's students in 2006 playing the World Peace Game. So in 1978, John Hunter was a school teacher in Virginia and was given the charge to do whatever he wanted with his students, a rare sort of thing. He asked, I have a story today, and he can talk a little bit more about this. He sort of went in and tried to figure, well, what do I do with these children? He was teaching gifted high school students in Virginia, and he had a very supportive administrator who told him to do what he wanted to do. And so he was charged with being a social studies teacher and wanted to figure out how to let his students do their lessons. And so he developed a game, a role-playing game, in which students would have to deal with various kinds of conflicts around Africa. And over the years, the game has been developing so that now the game is a very complicated role-playing game that takes place on 4 different levels of undersea, sea, earth, sky, and outer space. And the job of these children is to come together in different teams which represent different governments in a mythical sort of world. They also play members of the United Nations, the World Bank, and various kinds of financial institutions. Some of them are saboteurs, some of them are insurgents, some of them are arms dealers. And the job of the students is to learn how to work together to try to beat the game. And as you'll see, this is very complicated. So this is not, it's a children's game on one hand, but it's really not a children's game because the children are trying to solve the problems that we are trying to deal with now. So the questions of climate change and desertification, famine and war and civil war and different kinds of conflicts around the world. These are the issues that John's students are trying to grapple with in this game, 9 and 10-year-olds. And so in the past few years, this game has sort of taken off. Many people have played it around the world. John was the subject of a 2011 technology education and design video, so that some of you may have seen a TED video. And it took off like wildfire, right, at TED. It was voted one of the #1 TED Talks in the TED repertoire. In 2012, John Hunter was voted by Time Magazine to be one of the top educators in the United States. And most recently, he has been invited by the United Nations and the Pentagon to bring his students to play the world game in front of our military leaders. And so John will tell the stories. He was telling this story in some of my classes today, that there were 5-star generals coming in. Leon Panetta also came in and spent some time with John Hunter and the students. And we're talking peer to peer with his 9 and 10-year-old students about, we know how to do war, and we can do it very well. What we need to know is how to solve these problems peacefully, how to make peace. What can you tell us about how to do this? And the children had done this before. They had solved all of the world problems in different ways, and so they could tell the generals and Leon Panetta what we should be doing. And the message that's really wonderful about this film, and also from John Hunter's work, is that he tells the students, I'm sorry that we adults in some sense have failed you. We have created a world with lots of different kinds of problems. But what's so inspiring about John is he tells them, but I believe that you can make a difference, and I believe that you can solve these problems. And by creating that kind of inspiration, that kind of space, and showing that you trust them, they're able to play the game well. And for over 30 years or so, there have been no games that have ever been lost. That is, they always solve all of the world's problems. So the film this evening documents and shows some of the students playing this game, and I've been able to see some clips of this, and I'm so inspired by it, just to see these young folk so engaged with one another, looking at each other deeply, eye to eye, smiling, laughing, in some cases being very angry with each other, almost coming to blows. They take this very seriously. They take these issues as ones of deep importance. And sometimes I wish I could get my students to have that kind of spark in their eyes. John's able to accomplish that. So we're going to screen the film now, and then we'll have John up for some question and answers. And then we will have a reception together, break bread as a community, and come together and talk with John and with one another, and hopefully continue this legacy of Dr. King's beloved community here in Corvallis, Oregon. So let me now turn this over to our capable stage hands, and we'll begin the film, World Peace and Other Fourth Grade Achievements.
Funding for this film is provided in part by the Martin Institute for Teaching Excellence, offering professional development opportunities for teachers. Connect, educate, innovate.
All right, without much further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's please welcome John Hunter.
Thank you all so much for your affirmation. You have, in the last couple of days I've been here with the OSU team, Mr. Orozco and Ben and all the others, I've had nothing but a mirror reflection. The work we're trying to do, I've seen reflected in so many faces here and so many people here in this town. So thank you so much for that affirmation. I think we have a question and answer session now. Dr. Orozco.
So the way that this will work is that if you have a question for the purposes of our recording, I will repeat it and then John will be able to answer. So if you have a question, please go ahead and stand up, and then I will repeat the question as best I can. Yes.
My name is Holly Denman. I'm the principal of a small school in Portland, and I'm coming for the next 2 days. And when I first saw this, I knew not that I wanted to do this, but that I must. And the book is as good as the movie. And my concerns, because we got a small grant to build the game board, so the board is built, and we have done our best to figure out the dossiers and everything else that goes with it. And I wake up in cold sweats and it's going to be a train wreck. And the things that I'm worried about most are the parents being the saboteurs, and that I'm choosing the wrong class to begin with. I have an idea to start with 7th grade class who's having a lot of issues on their own, and it might make it worse. So I would be so grateful for any advice.
I commend your bravery.
So the question is, a teacher who is working to try to do a version of the World Peace game, concerned about how parents might influence the game, whether they would be saboteurs, and worried about how it would go and how it would be conducted, and any advice that you might have to make the game successful.
Oh my. I will say first that the nature of the game is to fail massively. It has to. Our children are always training for success, but they don't know how to handle failure. They never have an experience with it. You avoid it like the plague. Nobody wants to fail the course. But we see in the game that life is much bigger than just a one-sided coin. so everything has to be included. I would suggest you come and join our master classes. The Martin Institute for Teaching Excellence is in a partnership with me and supports us, holding them all over the country, all over the world now, actually. And we do train teachers to facilitate this experience. I can't imagine how you could do it from just watching the TED Talk. I feel sorry for that.
Watched a lot of times.
Yeah, we had a team in Hong Kong who sussed out from watching the TED Talk how they thought the game went. And they played it, and they wrote me a letter saying, "Is this right?" And I looked at the letter and I saw the pictures, and they didn't have enough space to actually build a board. They did it all on spreadsheets. And I said, "No, it's not right, but this is great. This is wonderful the way you're doing. Good luck." You know? So I advise you to come and get the actual DNA, so that saves you a lot of aggravation. Parents uniformly over decades, this is the eerie part, have been unanimously happy with it. That's almost a scary thought in itself. Right, left, or center, they've all been happy with it. It's been the oddest thing. I had one parent said, "Mr. Turner, I hate that game. That frightened me." I said, "Why?" She said, "Well, my daughter plays the game, and 3 of her friends play the game, and they play soccer every weekend. And I drive them to soccer matches in my SUV for 3 hours to another city, and the entire time, those 4 girls are talking at the top of their voices about nuclear proliferation, refugee issues, diplomacy, and it's just awful. So I hate that game." But please come and see us. It will save you a lot of trouble and aggravation, and your intuition will guide you as to who to win and how.
I have a question. John, when you woke up this morning, did you have any idea that you would end up making me feel better?
I was just trying to make myself feel better.
So the question was, John, when you woke up this morning, did you have any sense that you would make the gentleman feel better?
You know that the world peace game is such an open equation, and I'll confess to you the secret really. I go into every session afraid. I'm fearful that this time they will lose. This time they will not save the world. And there's no way I can kill it. I've written the rules, so I cannot interfere. I cannot step in and say, "Don't have war." They've got to discover for themselves that that doesn't work. So the feeling I have to go through is awful, it's terrible, but every time just the discipline of allowing and waiting and contemplation and trust is what makes me carry on. And they always, 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 always rise to the challenge. They discover collaboration. They discover compassion. I don't have to teach it. I don't have to preach it. I want them to know it, but the game is positive, so they will fail. So they will encounter and be encouraged to do everything wrong that we do as adults. They can be reactive. They can be aggressive. They can take revenge. They can be impulsive. They can do that in the game, and they learn through the consequences, experientially, in a safe and bloodless way, what is good for us all. And they realize that the game's goals are everyone has to increase their asset value, that they all have to win in order to win it all. And they discover that, and I just am marveled at it every time they do. Yeah, so it makes me feel good too, and I'm glad you do.
Thank you so much for your work with children and all your dedication to what you've done. It's amazing, so, and inspiration. It seems like you draw from many spiritual traditions. Is there any one that sort of guides you, or do you continue to draw from many world traditions?
So the question is it seems that you draw from many different spiritual traditions. Is there any one tradition that helps support you in your work, or is it many different traditions?
You know, in the film you can see I did a lot of study in a lot of places and worried my parents a lot. But having come back, I can say there are a lot of treasures in the world in philosophy. I think today we were having a discussion and talking about how the history and social studies department has expanded. And I remember the dean, Ben Mutzler, saying, and then the philosophers moved in. Something like that. Great line. But the philosophers had moved in with me, and they sort of encouraged me from all different stripes to consider. And I think the primary underlying guidance I receive is, and this is going to sound odd, this is something I've discovered through experience, is emptiness. Is not having an agenda, not having preconceptions. And it's a struggle, a discipline every day. Every time we play the game, I have to go through and try and weed out my own preconceptions, my own prejudices, my own biases, which are very subtle. I have it. And so that effort, that struggle, that self-reflective, self-introspective practice I have to do every day in order to remove my flaws from their learning process. So the practice I use really is a no practice. There's no John Hunter method at all, no technique whatsoever. So how do you do it? We just wait. And I'll conclude with just saying it's kind of like the lessons I learned in 3rd grade, 4th grade myself. Stop, look, and listen. Some of you older people might know that one. The students told me that's what we do in the World Peace Game. You make so many problems, we are stopped. We have to stop. We can't go further. There's nothing we can do but stop. And then we have to look. We have to look and look and look. And the looking, as I understood, deepens their awareness. Because they're looking at every nuance from every angle to see the interconnections that are layer upon layer. And so when they're done looking, then they have to listen. Then they turn to each other and they ask each other and they check with their friends and then they listen to themselves. What do I think? So the stop, look, and listen, that old safety message from 4th grade in the 50s, seems to be what my students are discovering now. That's kind of our tradition, I guess.
So, 2 questions. One in the back and then gentleman here to the back.
Why did you use 4th graders?
The question is, why did you use 4th graders for the game?
They didn't know better to say no. They got stuck in the room with me. No, I taught elementary school. I teach elementary school still just a bit. And that was my assignment. And so I had this game. I have a lot of other curriculum too I use. So I just happened to have that and I thought, I invented it for high school, but I bet 4th graders could handle it. And sure enough they could. 5th grade, yeah, 5th graders can do it too. 3rd grade, no, too young. We tried it, they just don't have quite the wherewithal. High school kids give me the most optimism because I've seen them time and time again play the most amazing, sophisticated game you can imagine. Our so-called slackers and skateboarders and punks save the world in such a way that it is astonishing. We've had military people come in with their jaws on the floor to see these guys relentlessly devoted to compassion and peace, no matter what you throw at them. So I have great confidence in our high school people to be able to help pull us out of this.
Yeah, my question is, you created an incredible environment in the classroom for these kids. What's their experience as they move on to other classrooms? I'm sure aren't quite on the same level. What's the longitudinal experience?
So the question is, John, you have these students have an amazing experience in your classroom. What happens to them once they leave your classroom, go into other classrooms? What's their experience there? What's the sort of longitudinal experience of your students after the game?
It's very good. When I was a beginning teacher, I was kind of a hotshot. I thought I was arrogant. Once they leave me, they're done. They don't need to do anything else. But I soon came to understand, in my travels in the last couple of years with this game all over the world, there are so many fantastic, great teachers. So many. Not only teachers, but it takes visionary, caring, and trusting administrators for those teachers to be able to survive and teach well. And there are so many, the tip of the iceberg may be here, but there's a wealth of good teaching. It just takes one negative news story and you think, oh, it's all bad. One negative story about education and public perception goes south quickly. But there's a lot of good going on. So we've had students who go away and years later get back in touch with me, and through our World Peace Game website now, they're writing letters saying, Mr. Hunter, I'm in policy and security issues, University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill, and I can solve political and diplomatic problems like nobody else. My professors are astounded. My hands tingle when I get a diplomatic problem because I'm going to solve it. And she said to her professors asked her, how are you able to do this? She said, I've been doing diplomacy since I was 9. So yeah, they're coming back letting us know the effects. Specific teachers know how heartwarming it is when they come back and let you know what your effect has been. So that's a great feeling. Such a feeling to have.
John, do you have a favorite story of a personal transformation with that one silent kid in the corner who, just blossomed?
Quite a few. Let me see which one.
A question just for recording. So, question is there a story that you have of one particular transformation of one of your students, perhaps the quiet one in the class, that you can share with us?
I don't want to bore you who've seen the TED Talk before or read the book. There's a couple of stories along that line there. I will take a chance and tell you about Pablo. Pablo was a very fifth grader who was as wide as he was tall, basically. His hair stuck up, and he had his teeth were kind of gapped, and he had thick glasses, and he talked and moved really, really slowly. And so Pablo was a problem for some people because he talked so slowly, and it was thought that he was not very smart. Pablo somehow ended up in my class, and I remember for some reason I felt something in me as a teacher. Pablo he's a leader. I can see it in him. Nothing else good. It didn't appear to be there. But I offered Pablo the position of prime minister. When he did that, his classmates looked at him like, the game's going to last forever. Pablo was stunned, and he took a few seconds to say, well, yeah. So Pablo played, and of course, in the World Peace game, my heart is broken every time we play, over and over again. And I'm hopeful, I'm optimistic, and they do every human thing you can do until they discern how best to be human. So Pablo failed miserably, time and time again. He works so slowly. Other prime ministers, their first term, they'd make 2 or 3 moves, the undersea level, the ground to sea level, maybe move an aircraft, outer space move, asteroid mining, 4 or 5 moves. Pablo would come to the board. I am Prime Minister Pablo Rodriguez, and these are my declarations. He makes 1 move and sits down, and all his teammates come. It'll take forever. 5 weeks went by. We're all suffering. We're working around Pablo. Pablo's excluded. He's not getting through. He's trying. I can't step in and make the students where I can't bend my own rules. I have to stay involved. I support, I ask questions, but I can't make suggestions. Week number 6, Pablo stands up, and I can see it coming because I've seen it before. Pablo's hands are shaking. He moves to the board a little bit more quickly than usual, which is not very fast. He gets there, and his eyes are kind of wide open. He says, even more quickly, I'm Pablo Rodriguez, and these are my declarations. And then, like a Jedi Knight, he moves all over the boards. 22 moves in about 2 minutes. It's astonishing. We're all stunned. The other kids say, who is this? This is not Pablo. We know. And Pablo himself is stunned. He stands back, stunned by what he has done. And I'm overcome. I say to him, I just can't contain myself, Pablo, you see. He turns to me and says, Mr. Hunter, I see everything. Pablo, you understand. Mr. Hunter, I understand everything. He had, we used to say, grok. He got the entire equation of the game in an instant. It is an equation. It is a formula. And he saw all the vectors and trend lines at once, and he acted accordingly. He essentially mastered the game in an instant. And that can happen because we allowed him to fail and supported him, but he was allowed to find his own way through. And so that quiet kid who had no confidence, who was, everybody would exclude because he just wasn't up to snuff at their level, really came into his own because he had a space to try, I think. So that story really moves me every time I think about it.
What is the significance of your clothing this evening?
question. What is the significance of your clothing, Sue?
I thought I'd dress very casually. Well, I just like to be comfortable. You know, you realize that in 20 years, 30 years from now, you won't remember me. You won't remember this nightmare. You might not remember me. You hopefully will remember some of the stories, because the stories are like seeds, and hopefully they can go with you. And so this is just a little garnish for the seeds, really. Yeah, something. Oh, there's a guy that's dressed. Yeah, the story. So it's a little spice for the story.
Well, I have many questions for you, but as a senior in high school, I guess I'll go with my college one. How did is it elaborate on your college experience and how it directed you, and also the experimental program, how that kind of helped you come to where you are?
So, question about your own college experience, is that correct? How did that sort of shape who you were, and this question about the sort of the experimental program that you went to, how did that shape who you are and the work that you do?
Yeah, maybe just like, what do you think some of the important experiences were that you had?
So, yeah, what were important experiences that you had in college that helped you develop your work?
That's a great question, and it's a pivotal question, a very important question at that time, this time to ask. For me, it of course was individual teachers who really cared about me and had a relationship with me. That was the fundamental key to my survival, my success. You know, you think about a self-made man, someone called a self-made person. I discovered there's no such thing. That any person who's successful is standing on the shoulders of so many other people. You know, if that person's parent, when that person was an infant, had looked away for an hour, they wouldn't have survived. So we owe such a debt to so many others who just ensured our survival, what to speak of our success. So that caring, loving relationship from some teacher, administrator who really cares, that was critical to me. And the second thing was, what they often did was they asked me what I thought, what my mother asked, what do you think you should do? My father would, I'd ask him, how can I fix this? My father would say, and he'd sit there for 5 minutes, and then he would say, so what do you think you should do? That don't help at all. This is what they, by nature, allowed space. They allowed me space rather than directives. There's so many people, there's so many internet sites and so many apps that want to tell you what to do and how to do things. You know, you can easily find someone who will tell you how to live exactly. But where do you find someone or some way that allows you space to reflect and digest all this information you're surrounded by? You know, I have said it before you. You're surrounded by the internet and Snapchat and Facebook and Twitter, all this stuff 24/7. How do you do it? I don't know. I can't do it. But you almost have to, because you have to be connected to survive in a way. But where is the space? Where is the app that allows you space for reflection? With nothing in the space, empty space, so you can digest and come to understand on your own. And decide what was best for you. So for me, it was a loving, caring, supportive relationships around me. And for those relationships to allow me space to understand things myself. 2 things. I hope it helps.
We have time for one more question.
As a member of the somewhat mid-generational generation that we have, what are some suggestions to help us along working these social technologies that we have and that we are faced with, and how we can help bridge the gap between generations and participate just as much as everyone else?
So a question about work between generations. What suggestions do you have for helping us to understand how to bridge a gap between generations so that we work together, perhaps using different kinds of social technologies? What's your advice for helping us to think intergenerationally?
You know, one thing I try to be very careful in doing, and it seems maybe odd because I'm on stage, but I try not to give advice actually. Because I don't know you. I haven't met you yet. I don't know your situation, what you're facing, how you really feel, who you really are. So what I could say from just hearing your question might not be the right thing. What I can say though is something universal that the game and these children have taught me. And that is by really, I guess the middle part of that stop, look, and listen, the looking and the listening part. That's not advice, this is just my experience of what my students have taught me. That when they look, they stop long enough to really look into a situation. They look for long enough until the situation begins to reveal the nuances of what really is there. You know, their preconceptions, their prejudices, biases, their filters are there, but they allow those veils to thin by just looking for a long time. And when things become clear enough, they can maybe see better what is really there. And then, of course, the listening is your own heart. So it's not really a method, it's what we humans do naturally. Anyway, what we have within us, the tool is right here, it's our own heart. So I've found, and they've shown me, listening to your own heart, because you have so many sources of information and directives pointed at you. How can you decide? It's almost impossible these days. I mean, we're drowning in information, directives, and advice, and ways to go, and programs to follow, philosophies to believe in. So these children, they do this, they listen to themselves, because there is no answer, there's no way to solve this. I can't even solve it, I admit it. So that, again, I don't want to say it's advice, but I've seen them demonstrate this experientially, that listening to their own heart seems to be the way forward best, and it always results in compassion, which always opens the door in communication across race, across gender, across generations, I think. So I hope it doesn't come off like, you know, an old guy telling you what to do.
Not at all.
Okay, thank you. You got it really good.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, please let us thank John Hunter for